when you get to your wheel, you should have, if the last person cleaned up properly, a clean wheel. You should have these 4 tools all happily placed and ready for you. You got your needle tool, wooden rib, little sponge, and your wire cutter. And the wire cutter, I would like to see them like this, where they're just neatly wrapped up. And I can show you how to take that out. You just unwrap it twice. I lied. There we go. And then just carefully untwist, rather than pulling it tight and trying to magically pull any knots out of it, because what happens then is you get all these kinks like we see in this particular wire cutter, and these kinks right here and right there eventually break, and then you slice your finger open on a sharp piece of metal, and that's no fun. So, and then when you're done at the end of the class, you can wrap it up once, twice, tuck it through 1 time, maybe 2 times, and it should just be happily sitting there for the next person. That keeps it from getting tangled down underneath and any kind of bad things that might happen. All right, so we won't be using that. We will be using this. You might use that, but probably not today. So as we're getting started, ready to center, you're going to use some freshly wedged clay, and hopefully you understand why it's important to wedge at this point. And work that spiral wedge into something that looks sort of like a old space shuttle capsule coming down, or Hershey's Kiss or something like that. Then you're going to get your sponge wet, wring out all the water. You don't really need that much. You just want to make your wheel shiny but not dripping. So just a little bit of shiny. You don't have to do anything to the clay. Slam it down in the middle. Work it back and forth a little bit so it does stick, and then just move the wheel slowly and pound it into the middle so it's mostly centered already. Now, before we add water to it, I recommend that you do what I call a little tree trunk or tree roots, and smear that down so that it's closed off. There's no place for the water to get underneath, because if there's too much water on the wheel, the clay pops off. If there's not enough water on the wheel, the clay pops off. This way, you don't get that capillary action that pulls the water underneath to add water under the clay, and that would be bad. All right, so when you are centering, 3 S's. First S is speed, second S is slippery, and the third S is support or strength. So I'll get the wheel going fast. I'm going to add some water for my slippery. And support. If I keep my elbows locked into my body, that gives me more support. My body will do all the work instead of trying to use my arms to muscle the clay. And what I'm going to do is lean into the clay with my body weight to help it find center, instead of trying to use my hands and my fingers and my arms to do all that work, because you get tired that way. So speed, slip, support. So elbows locked in. And I'm going to work with my head directly over the top of the clay. So my head weight, my shoulder weight is what is keeping everything steady and centered. And I've got 2 C's that I'm going to remember as well. The first C is called coning, and we're almost in a cone shape already. And the second C is compressing. So we're going to cone and compress the clay. Speed, slip, support. So I'm leaning over the top, coning the clay up first, and I'm just using my fingertips right here at about 1 o'clock on the wheel. So if I've got 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 12, 3, 6, 9. If I'm up at 1 o'clock, I can press that clay with my fingertips in and up into a cone shape, and then I can start to compress that back down. So when I compress, I usually have a sponge full of water, and so every once in a while I give it a little squeeze, just a tiny squeeze, so I get a couple drips of water to keep everything slippery. My left hand now, I'm going to use this portion of my left hand right here at about 7 o'clock on the wheel, and then this portion, like I'm karate chopping the top of the clay, and I'm leaning down and into it, keeping it slippery by squeezing a little bit of water every once in a while. And I'm going to bring that down and compress the clay into the center. To avoid this mushrooming shape that we get right here, keep the pressure on the side As you press down, my wheel's slowing down, so I got to remember my first S. Take your hands off the clay before you kick, otherwise you knock it out of center. Okay, so I'm going to lean in. My head is directly over the top of my clay. My head weight, my shoulder weight is what's pushing downward, so I don't have to use my arm strength. And I'm leaning in with this part of my hand. My elbow is in tight against my hip or my side, so that when I lean forward, you can see how my arm comes forward with it. My body weight is what's pushing that in and towards the middle. I'm not using my arm strength. So that way I don't get tired. So leaning in and down, pushing in with the side at the same point, that's called compressing. We're bringing that clay in tight into a compressed clay body. So I'm going to cone and compress one more time so you can see that method from start to finish. A little bit of water. At 1 o'clock, I put my fingertips in about 1 o'clock. My other hand can be on the back side to press that in. And now instead of that mushroom shape, we're getting that volcano. You can prevent that by keeping your left hand over the top as you bring the clay up into a cone. And your cone doesn't have to be super tall like a pillar. But something about like that, just to bring any clay that's bumping on the outside in towards the center. And then after you cone, you compress. Body weight doing the work, so your arms don't have to. And you'll know when it's centered because the clay is not pushing back against you anymore. It's not bumping out as it goes around. So it's more of a feel than a look. But then once it finds center, relax your hands where they are slowly and work your arms out after you've relaxed. If you pull your hands away too quickly, Newton's third law, for every action, meaning the force that I'm adding into the clay is pushing directly back towards me. So if I let go too quickly, the clay is going to rebound or reflex back out. And you can see where the wobble is now. So the clay wants to push back. You want to make sure that you relax out slowly. Find center, slowly relax out. Once you think you've got it centered, you get my attention. I'll take a look at it from wherever I am, tell you yes, that counts, or no, it doesn't count, it's not quite centered yet. If it counts, then you count that towards one of your 5 centers, and after you've gotten 5 centers, you move on to the next part of the project. You can kind of see a little bit of extra down here, you'll get that a lot. So if you've got it uneven at the bottom, sometimes just the back of your thumb, peel away that uneven stuff at the bottom, and you're good to go. And that is how you center clay.